No one likes pollution, but we do like our cars. They just make it easy for us to travel around the cities and the towns. They just make it convenient for us to go for shorter or longer journeys. We also like various goods and services which make our lives easy and comfortable. So, in that sense, free market, we believe, is one of the best way of resource allocation. However, whenever we are talking about the supply and demand interaction in the market, we are ignoring one very important concept. And that is what we are going to learn about today. So, we are going to learn about negative externalities. This video will primarily focus on negative externalities because of production as a function. So, let's get started. So we'll start with a very simple definition of negative externalities. So what are negative externalities? Negative externalities, in this scenario, because we are focusing on production, we are talking about when production of a good harms third parties. Who are these third parties? A free market is about consumer maximizing their satisfaction, their utility. A free market is about the producer maximizing their profits. So in that scenario, they're not really going to worry or bother about what will be the societal impact of their economic transaction. Therefore, third parties in this case will have a spillover cost and they are not involved in that economic transaction. Overall, because it's a negative externality, we will call this spillover effect a cost on the society. So what would that lead to? Now, negative externality is one of the cause of market failure. So, through a diagram, we can explain that how social cost would be higher than the private cost of production. So, let's have a look at few concepts that we would then apply to this diagram and try to understand more about negative externalities. Let's get started. So, the first thing, the basic idea that we are starting from would be we are talking about the existence of free market. In this case, we can see the free market is showing us interaction of supply and demand. That means P1 is the price and the quantity that is being traded at this given price level. So I will just label that as free market. Now, we know we will always keep our self-interest first. So therefore, anything which is convenient for me, which is useful for me as per my beliefs, I would want to consume it. I might not really think about how am I going to impact a third party. Let's talk about this. When we are thinking about a free market equilibrium, we know free market exists where P1 and Q1 is the area. So how are we going to change the label of our curves in terms of supply and demand? Market failure is all about us trying to understand about the cost and the benefit analysis. So your demand curve will become marginal private benefit curve. Supply is about the cost. So the supply curve is going to change into marginal private cost, which makes sense. A free market is about a private interaction that is happening between suppliers and direct party and consumers. Therefore, we are going to talk about that how this particular scenario is not taking into account any side effect, any spillover cost that is happening. So what is the next thing that we want to add in here? We are going to think about the market failure. So let's take an example when we are talking about pollution. Now, we know production is important for us. It's important for economic growth as well. But whenever production function is carried on, it would lead to pollution. It could be air pollution, it could be water pollution, it could be noise pollution. So how do I show that on a graph? Remember, it's a negative externality. Therefore, it will have a higher cost on society than the private cost of a business. So in this case, we are going to shift our supply curve to the left. And let's label that as marginal social cost. Right. So, what would be a marginal social cost of air pollution that could lead to health problems of the residents who are going to live nearby that area, that can also impact their productivity at the workplace? Therefore, that is what we are trying to apply here, that negative externalities would lead to a higher external third party cost. How do I show marginal external cost on this diagram? Remember, the vertical distance between these two lines is the marginal external cost. So, the most simple way for you to define, the most simple way for you to understand marginal social cost would be when we combine the private cost and the external cost, then we can see what would be the impact of economic transaction on third party, which can either lead to benefits or cost. In this case, we are talking of negative externalities, so definitely it is a cost that we are going to consider. Now, that is how we acknowledge that when cost benefit analysis is brought in, we can see that society is clearly losing out because of the business's self interest. Then what should be done once we identify the social cost being higher than the private cost? We need to bring in our knowledge about social optimum level. So what is social optimum level? Social optimum level, think about it this way. It's an ideal level where the market should actually be operating. So let's have a look. So now we know that this is where the free market was operating. Bringing a knowledge about the cost on the third party, we can find a new interaction that is happening in the market, which is social optimum level. So, based on the cost benefit analysis, we are going to label that as P star and Q star. Therefore, if I go back to free market, I can say that yes, negative externalities are existing because clearly the free market is overproducing. So we have overproduction as a problem here. And if I'm thinking about consumption, then I can also label overconsumption. Right. So now we understand that negative externalities will bring in that knowledge that is needed to then further think what interventions could be used here. So let's label this as the social optimum level. That means in an ideal world, this is where production should be happening. Now, we go back to understanding that if free market continues the way it is, what kind of loss are we talking about? And how do we show that on a graph? So we are talking about the concept of area of welfare loss. Meaning, through this graph, we are going to show a triangle which is going to show that how social cost is higher than the private cost. So where will I label the vertical distance between marginal cost and private cost is showing us the welfare loss triangle. Therefore, from here we can see now everything that we just spoke about. The definition of negative externalities, for example, that it is a spillover cost on a third party. Okay, we have shown that how a producer's action in this case is leading to social cost being higher than the private cost, which will also give us idea about that it is a clear case of overproduction at Q1 level. Therefore, when the knowledge of social optimum level or that ideal level of production is brought in, we can see that P star, Q star represents that benefit cost analysis regarding negative externalities in a certain market. So we covered everything is labeled here. We have the graph, we have a definition at place. The assumption that we actually started with was that economic agents, consumers and producers, they are self-interested. Therefore, a free market ignores the concept of negative externalities and the government has to intervene in the market do a cost and benefit analysis, and then accordingly see that what intervention might be useful to correct this market failure. I hope you liked the video. Let me know what other topics would you like me to cover. Have a good day.